Hello Lana, welcome to my lesson. Today we are going to learn baking rubbing in method. Meaning of baking. Baking is a method of cooking food that uses dry heat, normally done in an oven. Baking is appropriate for foods that have enough moisture such as potatoes and flour mixtures for cakes, bread, and other food items. Baked foods have a great taste and attractive appearance. Baking rubbed in method is the process of cooking by dry heat, especially in an oven. It can also be done in hot ashes or on hot stones. Foods that can be baked. Baking is appropriate for foods that have enough moisture such as potatoes and flour mixtures for cakes, bread, and other food items. Baking as a method of cooking normally gives baked food items a characteristic flavor, aroma, texture, and color. Why do we grease the tin or sufuria before pouring the cake mixture? Prevent sticking. The primary reason for greasing the tin is to prevent the cake from sticking to the sides during cooking. This makes it much easier when it comes to turning the finished cake out of the tin. Why do we sieve the flour, sugar, and baking powder together before we start baking? Removing impurities helps to remove any impurities, such as small stones or dirt, that might have accidentally found their way into the ingredients. Breaking up clumps also breaks up any clumps that may have formed during storage or transportation. Clumpy ingredients can lead to uneven distribution in the batter, resulting in baked goods with inconsistent textures and flavors. Creates a barrier. Coating a greased cake pan with a thin dusting of flour creates a barrier between the grease and the cake batter. This prevents the grease from melting and disappearing into the batter as the cake bakes, allowing it to do its job in the end, after the cake is baked. The following type of food can be baked: bread, biscuits, pies, pizza, scones, potatoes, cakes, cookies, donuts. Equipment and material used for baking. Measuring cups, jugs, and spoons. They are used to measure by dry and liquid ingredients. Rubber spatula or scraper. It is used to gently scrape out contents from a bowl without scratching the surface. Pastry brush. It is used to spread butter, oil, or other ingredients on the food items to the food item to be baked. Whisk. It is used to stir and mix the ingredients together. Rolling pin. It is used to shape and flatten the dough. Baking sheet. It is used when baking items that are stiff enough to stand on their own, for example, pies. Baking tins. They are used to hold mixtures that are liquid in nature and cannot hold on their own, for example, cake mixture. Equipment and material used for baking. Mixer. Rubber spatula or scraper. Baking pans. Measuring cups, jug, and spoons. Mixing bowl. Pastry brush. Whisk. Rolling pin. Baking sheet. Baking tins. Oven. Plate. Gloves. Bowl. Measuring jug. Aluminium foil roll. Electronic scale beam. Cooling rack. Chef's knife. Kitchen scissors. Baking basin. Round cake pan. Skewer. Baking tins. Materials used for baking. Flour, it is the main ingredient for baking. Sugar, it used to sweeten the item being baked. It also helps to add the brown color to the baked product. Eggs, they are to add flavor and air to the product being baked. Milk, it is used to add moisture and flavor to the product. Baking powder is a raising agent and helps the cake to rise. Water is used to add moisture to the product. Breaking eggs separately before adding them to your recipe has several benefits. Avoiding bad eggs. If an egg is bad or spoiled, breaking it separately ensures that it won't ruin the rest of your ingredients. Preventing shell fragments. If a piece of shell gets into the mix, it's much easier to remove it from a small bowl than from a large mixture. Separating yolks and whites, some recipes require only the yolk or the white of an egg. Breaking eggs separately makes it easier to separate these components. Whisking egg whites, for some recipes, egg whites need to be whisked separately to incorporate air and create a fluffy texture. The materials used for baking: wheat flour, salt, milk, oil, eggs, sugar, baking powder, margarine, water. Cooling cakes after baking is an important step for several reasons. Setting the cake. Cooling allows the cake to set and firm up, making it easier to handle and less likely to crumble. This is especially important if you are planning to decorate the cake. Preventing frosting from melting. If a cake is frosted while it's still warm, the heat can cause the frosting or icing to melt. Allowing the cake to cool properly ensures that the frosting or icing will not melt when applied. Improving texture and taste. Cooling your cake properly can make a significant difference in the final product's texture and taste. Preventing cracking. If you attempt to remove the cake from the pan right out of the oven, it will likely crack and fall apart. Cooling the cake for about 10 to 30 minutes helps prevent this. Safe for refrigeration. After letting the cake cool slightly in the pan for about 5 to 10 minutes, you can safely transfer it to the fridge for further cooling. Safety measures to practice when baking. Use kitchen gloves when removing baked item from the oven. Do not put your hand or spoon in the mixer when it is running. Wear protective clothing when baking. Do not open the oven door when the cake is still baking. Dry your hands before touching any electrical switches. Store the sharp equipment such as knife with the blade facing downwards. Report any dangers you notice in bakery. Avoid eating raw dough. Wash your hands after handling eggs. Keep countertop clean. Wear a clean apron. Tie back long hair. Remove jewelry. Keep your baked food in a clean environment to avoid contamination. Improvising equipment for baking at home. Sufuria, jiko, matchbox, sand, charcoal, kitchen towel, newspaper. Storing baked cakes. It is important to store cakes properly to prevent them from spoiling. We can store cakes at room temperature or in the refrigerator. When storing a cake in room temperature, put it in a plastic container. Cover the container to avoid exposure to germs and insects. When storing cake in refrigerator, put it in a plastic container. Cover the container with a lid to prevent it from drying out. Always store in a cool, dry place. To store cakes for a short time, put them in a bowl or container and cover it to keep away dust, dirt and flies. Store on a shelf or cupboard where there is free flow of air. Cakes that have been cut should be covered with a cling film or put in an airtight container to prevent loss of moisture. Cakes that need to be preserved for a longer period of time should be put in an airtight container and keep in a refrigerator.